Every geopolitical pundit on television keeps saying that we are in a second Cold War. They're completely wrong, and that historical blindness is going to get the West killed. Uh, the original Cold War was a binary ideological struggle. Two superpowers stared at each other across clearly defined fronts. Even in its most dangerous moments, the Cold War had rules. Both sides were Western in origin. Both understood deterrence logic. Both respected the basic sovereignty of the nation states. Today, at a degree, of course, not at all. Today's conflict has none of these constraints. So Huntington once saw the post-Cold War era of what he called a clash of civilization in his very same book, where the most important distinction among people are culture rather than ideological. So Huntington divided the world into eight major civilizations: Sinic, Chinese, Japanese, Hindu, Islamic, Orthodox, Western, and Latin American, African. So, and argued that new patterns of conflict could and would occur along these civilization fault lines. We are living in that reality right now. So, I'm not here to rehash mid-century history. I'm here to give you a brief on what I call the axis of totalitarianism. I've written articles about this. So this is not I mean, this axis of totalitarianism is not a unified communist bloc. It's a pragmatic alliance of Confucian authoritarianism, Islamic resurgence, and Russian imperialism, united by one single goal: the destruction of the Western model. Mm, um, um, However, before attacking this axis, we must define what the West actually is. So the West is not a race or a continent, right? It's a synthesis. It's a Judeo-Christian moral universalism and Greco-Roman legal rationalism. Out of the synthesis emerged the most revolutionary concept in human history: the sovereignty of the individual. Western law places the person at the center. Power is delegated upward from individuals rather than downward from the state. So, in Huntington's word, modernization is not as the same as westernization. So, modernization can increase cross-cultural communication while making the world less Western. After 1945, the United States and also allies did something unprecedented. They stopped fighting each other. Military conquest was replaced by economic competition, innovation, capital accumulation, and also trade, rather than territorial expansion. To a high degree, however, it was for United States and his allies was this. I mean, they were not after territorial expansion. However, for the other bloc, I mean, for the um, communist bloc, they had a vast amount of territorial expansion because the engine of the because the engine of the power, they didn't go after the territorial expansion, but they went after the innovation, capital accumulation, also trade. So I call that as Pax Occidentalist. Pax Occidentalist created an era which within democracies competed through invention and productivity instead of war. This period produced the largest rise in global living standards ever recorded. So it succeeded, however, and it succeeded because Western institutions protected property, enforced contract, and allowed creative distraction. In Huntington terms, modern trade networks are deeply interdependent. Cultural influence flows in multiple directions, but the core remain Western rule of law. So Western nations are high-trust, open-market societies. The Human Freedom Index 2024 ranks North America and also Western Europe at the top of the global freedom tables, while China is at the 115 and also Russia is at 139, set near the bottom. So the World Justice Project Rule of Law Index 2025 similarly shows Western democracies for outperforming autocracies in legal protection and corruption control. Transparency and competition are moral abstractions. They're not moral abstractions. They are strategic assets. So these institutions allow Western companies to fail and new ones to rise. Only 49 firms from the original 1955 Fortune 500 still existed on the list in 2024. So it proves that capitalism recycles wealth instead of ossifying it. So this is the essence of Pax Occidentalis, a system that uses market instead of armies to allocate power. It replaced tribute with investment. It made rule of law, not family lineage, the basis of legitimacy. This is what the Axis seeks to destroy. Uh, and this the so-called Axis is not an ideological bloc. It's a convergence of convenience. China, Russia, and the Islamic world share no unified doctrine, right? So the Soviet bloc had ideological discipline. Moscow enforced Marxist conformity. Today's Axis is pragmatic. Alliances shift. The only common denominator is hostility towards Western liberalism. Better to say Western capitalism, actually. Or what we mean by liberalism, actually, the classic liberalism, libertarianism. Uh, so today, Russia is, of course, not a communist country, it's an imperial country. Its narrative is one of the lost glory and promised restoration. Yet Russia is not entirely aligned to the West. It's Orthodox Christian. Its literature is European. It straddles the boundary between Western and Orthodox civilization. That makes Russia the wild card of the Axis. Uh, Actually, it oscillates between integration and also revanchism, right? Western strategy must recognize this ambiguity. I mean, treating Russia as a permanently outside the Western civilization sphere can also become a self-fighting, self-fulfilling prophecy. So, on the other hand, we have China. China is the structural core of the Axis. It's not a classical Marxist. It's the fusion of Confucian hierarchical social philosophy and also Leninist party discipline. So the individual exists within nested obligation to family and also state. The Chinese Communist Party has layered digital surveillance onto this structure, creating algorithmic authoritarianism, right? Its power is exercised through infrastructure entanglement rather than ideological export. So Belt and Road loans, 5G networks, rare air supply chains, and industrial dependency. So the axis is not rhetorical. I mean, it has teeth. Military ties among China, Russia, and Iran and North Korea are deepening. Millions of North Korean artillery shells and thousands of Iranian drones have appeared on the battlefield in Ukraine, while Chinese economic assistance backstops the Russian war support. So Russia and North Korea have signed a mutual defense pact also, and Russia is negotiating comprehensive treaty with Iran that includes a defense component. The benefits are obvious. I mean, China secures raw materials and military technology. Russia gains an economic lifeline and weapons from North Korea and uh, Iran and North Korea receive great power backing. Um, they're not actually receiving. I mean, they believe they're receiving. I believe because the last one in Iran shows that Iran is very isolated and the great powers like China and Russia are not coming to help. So this is a transactional cartel. This is not a confederation of equals. It's not an alliance. It's an unholy alliance, I would say. So unlike Asia's modernization, which could occur without adopting Western values, the Islamic world has asserted its identity through the religious reaffirmation. So Huntington also argued that the Islam resurgence embodies the acceptance of modernity, rejection of Western culture, and recommitment to Islam as a guide to life in the modern world. He linked this resurgence to the failure of state economies, large youth populations, and authoritarian governance. So the Axis leverages this content to enlist proxy actors from Hezbollah to Houthis, giving Moscow and Beijing deniability while attacking Western interests. Iran's drones in Ukraine and Hamas rocket arsenal are not ideological exports. They're a strategic investment in a civilizational front against West. We need to note that. The West's greatest vulnerability is not external pressure, it's internal confusion. I mean, Western societies have convinced themselves that mass migration from collectivist theocratic societies will naturally assimilate into liberal democracy. To a very low degree, that might be correct. We have the ifs, but to a large degree, that's a fantasy. So assimilation is not automatic; it's a revolution of the soul. So most of the immigrations from the Middle Eastern countries and cultures often view the Western societies as libertine and face an assimilation crisis. So it's a crisis for them. Luma seems, writing from personal experience, explains immigration severs bonds of family, religion, and state and require an inner revolution beyond more behavioral adaptation. So the true internal assimilation takes at least a generation or two. The stronger the attachment to religion and tradition, the longer and less complete assimilation, right? This process cannot occur if new arrivals from parallel counter pockets and if the host society lacks confidence in its own founding principles. So Huntington noted that as modernization accelerates, religion fills the vacuum left by ideology. So in the Islamic world, the concept of ummah, global community of believers, supersedes national boundaries. The Western state is territorial, political Islam is supranational. When Western governments import large populations with primary loyalties to their religious community rather than a nation state, they create a civilization of schizophrenia. This is a term I coined that it means a simultaneous commitment to incompatible political models while living in the West. So the West celebrates tolerance but loses the ability to define itself. Civilization of schizophrenia is not about race, it's about incompatible conception of sovereignty. So the result is very clear. Internal polarization and loss of strategic clarity. Western cities, Western elites uh, uh, talk about multiculturalism while Beijing and Moscow weaponize demographic flows. So the Axis does not need to win wars, it needs to paralyze Western decision making. A society that cannot articulate why its value or spirit cannot defend them. So during the Cold War, economic ties between the blocs were limited. Decoupling was feasible. Today, supply chain adversaries and um, allies together. Western smartphone companies rely on Chinese rare earths, right? And Chinese factories rely on Western design software. So Russian energy still powers part of Europe. Interdependence makes the conflict harder to manage and easier to exploit. The geoeconomic fragmentation is accelerating. The UN Conference on Trade and Development reports that global foreign and direct investment fell by 3% in 2005 with cross-border mergers and also acquisition down to 80%. And greenfield supply chain projects down to 9%. So, UN Conference on Trade and Development attributes this decline to geopolitical tensions, protectionism, and also supply chain reshoring, which is correct. And multinationalism are retrenching into friendly markets. This is not decoupling, however, it's a bifurcation. So two competing systems with limited interoperability, right? So Western banks face tough choices. Secondary sanction measures that punish third parties for dealing with sanctioned states have become central to U.S. policy. So Scadden's 2025 sanctions outlook notes that U.S. secondary sanction can cut foreign banks off from dollar clearing. The sanctions now target third-party support for Russia, Iran, and also Venezuela. The message is simple: middleman states or companies cannot hedge between the right? The blocks either complying with Western security mandates or be cut off from the global dollar network. The economic divide mirrors a civilization. So high trust societies attract capital, extractive regimes repel it, right? So the human freedom exchange shows that freer nations enjoy higher income, longer life expectancy, and lower corruption. So investment flows follow the same pattern. When nations attempt to hedge, sourcing Western capital and Eastern cheap labor simultaneously, foreign direct investment collapses. Economically, this is very clear. There's no neutral ground. Geopolitical risk kills investment. Um, but how? But let's make one thing very clear. The axis of totalitarianism, with all these, is worse than the Cold War. And you know why? Because first, uh, they have no shared values. So Cold War adversaries respected certain red lines because they were both rooted in Western political thought. Today's civilization adversaries do not share normative frameworks. Cyber attacks on hospitals, hostage taking, and proxy terrorism blur the concept of deterrence. They do not have ideological symmetry. Marxism and liberalism, the classical liberalism, both image from Western philosophy. Confucian authoritarianism, political Islam, and Russian imperialism share no ideological grammar at all. So you cannot negotiate a compromise between the rights of the individual and the sovereignty of the Ummah. No geographical containment. This is another issue. So the Iron Curtain was physical. I mean, today's front lines are digital networks, data cables, diaspora communities, and undersea energy pipelines. And there's also a technology asymmetry. So the Soviet Union lacked technologically. China competes on AI and quantum, and also on biotech. Iran exports precision missiles. North Korea hacks banks. And economic independence gives them Western capital to fuel their innovations, right? And the internal fragmentation is also an issue. I mean, the West is ideologically fractured. Populist movement identity, politics, and demographic anxiety undermine consensus. The Axis feeds this division through disinformation, cyber operations, and financial influence. It's not bipolar stability, it's a multipolar volatility. The Cold War analogy is comforting because it suggests familiar deterrence games. In reality, we are witnessing a civilizational realignment with multiple power centers and fluid alliances. So, Western policy has oscillated between appeasement and disengagement. So the Obama and Biden administration offered overtures to Iran, and the Trump administration tried reapproachment with North Korea. All attempted visits with Russia. All failed. Each of these adversaries is unhappy with the status quo and also sees a strategic benefit in cooperation, in cooperating with them. So even if a truce is brokered in Ukraine or in the Middle East, the Axis will endure because it serves the self-interest of its own members. So the West self-deception goes deeper than policy steps. We have convinced ourselves that importing millions of people from collectivist societies does not require a re-articulation of Western identity. We romanticize neutrality and also multiculturalism, why the Axis weaponized supply chain, energy routes, and also demographic flows. Switzerland, 2026, neutrality referendum seeking to inscribe staying out of it into the constitution is the clearest sign that the old middleman strategy is dead. In a bifurcated world, neutrality makes you a treat, not a safe harbor. So there is no safe middle ground for states or corporations. Businesses that try to maintain globalist supply chains that are committing fiduciary malpractice. CEOs have, their duty to recognize that friendshoring is not buzzword, is a military economic requirement. So boards that continue to invest heavily in autocratic jurisdictions face sanctions, risk, capital controls, and reputational blowback. So we're not finding competing economic model like Soviet communism, but we are fighting an alliance of civilizations that view the West's fundamental premise, individual liberty, as an existential threat to their collective control. Let's be capitalist. We are capitalists. China fears individual political autonomy because it fractures parties' supremacy. Politicalism rejects secular sovereignty because it subordinates divine law. So Russian imperialism resists liberalism and capitalism because it dissolves centralized authority. And these forces do not need a shared doctrine. They need a shared adversary. You cannot deter this with Cold War tactics. The containment and appeasement are obsolete. The West must embrace hard power realism and civilizational self-confidence. This means defending borders, decoupling critical supply chain, reshoring essential industries, and enforcing strict immigration policies uh, tied to the abiding by. So the immigration shall abide by the Western rules, and thus immigration shall be based on a meritocracy. It means building alliance with high trust societies and isolating extractive regimes. So it means rejecting the fantasy that all cultures are equally compatible with Western culture. So the Cold War analogy in West, I mean, complacency. The civilization reality demands urgency. This clash of civilization is rewriting global trade and security. The middle ground is gone. So anyone should choose your luck.